afternoon, this is BBC News 24. I'm Chris Eakin near Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire, where there were a series of huge explosions this morning which could be heard as far away as Holland. They're headlines this afternoon. Pictures taken from just after these explosions happened showed just how dramatic the scene was here, with shockwaves being sent up to 100 miles away. Firefighters have been starting from the outside and working towards the inside, but they have made it clear that it's a question of containing this fire rather than putting it out. And as the cloud heads up and then east across much of the southern part of the country, there is a health warning. If you're in its path, stay indoors, keep your windows and doors shut. There's been a huge knock-on effect for traffic. The M1 motorway is closed. Even flights at Heathrow have been affected. Well, hello. We're a mile or so away from the seat of this fire, from where the explosions happened at 6 o'clock in the morning. And despite it was so long ago, still the smoke coming out at the same sort of rate, up into the sky and then moving off towards the east, affecting large parts of the south of England, of the southeast in particular. And anybody in its path has been told to stay indoors and keep the windows shut. Richter reports on events so far today.
It was the biggest explosion in Britain for decades, a dense plume of smoke hundreds of metres tall with almost continuous fireballs rolling into the sky. Millions of gallons of fuel are stored here, and the initial blast was felt up to 100 miles away. BBC correspondent Colin Campbell was reporting in central London when it went off.
I actually can just tell you that I heard a very, very large explosion just behind me a few seconds ago.
Close to the scene, a CCTV camera caught the moment of the blast, lighting up the sky like an early sunrise.
We're right next to it. We're the closest anyone is at the moment.
These local lads went straight to the scene with a camcorder against police advice. Their video footage gives some sense of the scale of the destruction at the depot and the intense heat coming from the fire. Across the field, a building was left shattered by the pressure wave from the blast. This man was in the complex when it went up.
A very, very bright orange light, then an extreme shock, and the whole ceiling fell in, and the doors are blown inwards, and knocked me off my chair.
With so much fuel, it's proved to be almost impossible to control this blaze. Fire crews could do little in the face of this wall of flame. Police are warning that the smoke could pose a danger to health.
Our very strong advice is that people must keep out of the plume of smoke. And if the windows of your house have been blown out or are damaged, then we would suggest that you should evacuate yourself to somewhere safer.
Nearby roads, including part of the M1, were closed as emergency services dealt with the explosion, which shook many nearby residents from their beds.
Literally 6 o'clock on the button this morning, there was this almighty bang, and obviously lying in bed asleep, and just the whole family were woken, and the house literally tremoured.
I got up and I had a look out the window because there was alarms going off all over the place. Next thing I could see these flames just on the horizon over there, and they were monstrous. They were going up 400 or 500 feet in the air.
Buncefield is one of the largest depots in the country, but experts say they are prepared for such a problem and fuel supply lines will not be affected. Given the extent of the blast, it seems remarkable there haven't been more serious injuries. Windows have been shattered for miles around, and some properties have suffered structural damage too. Most of the damage, though, has been caused to the site itself. From the air, you can see building after building smashed by the explosion, with many others still in flames. Police say the explosions could continue for some time. They still believe this was the result of some kind of accident, but it could be days or even weeks before anyone knows for sure. In the meantime, this impenetrable blanket of thick black smoke continues to roll ever further across the southeast. Richard Lister, BBC News.
Well, Richard talking there about how it was remarkable that although there were 36 people hurt, mostly in a minor way, nobody was killed in this explosion. When you look at the extent of it, still all these hours on, it does seem extraordinary that, and very lucky that nobody has been terribly badly hurt. It's very noticeable at the seat of the fire and where this is happening that even the flames are still licking up. If we come to my camera here and we see the bottom of the smoke and see the extent to which the activity is still taking place, and even off to its right, downwind, there is a clear area of blue sky, bizarrely, with the smoke going up. It goes over and then it comes back down. And then you get into this smog, into this like a sort of pea soup fog. And that's the problem for the people who are living in the huge path of this smoke over a considerable number of miles. That's where people have been told to be careful. Now, a lot of the dramatic images of this explosion have come from our viewers using mobile phones and video cameras. And we can have a look at some of those now in a report by Daniel.The.
Some of the first images taken after the initial explosion, flames leaping high into the sky, amateur video and mobile phone pictures sent in by viewers showing just how intense the fire was. Residents woken by the blast speak of the confusion as they try to work out what had happened.
The whole house was shaking. Didn't know whether it was an earthquake or what, and then there was this almighty explosion. All burglar alarms, everything started going off. Looked out the front window and we can see flames.
More pictures from viewers, these showing burning cars. Some of those close enough to capture images like this say they could feel the heat from where they stood. One eyewitness, a tanker driver arriving for work at the depot, described seeing a giant fireball.
It was about 50 metres wide. And then the loudest explosion, the loudest bang I've ever heard in my life, it took me off my feet. I'm not quite sure, don't see whether my knees had buckled or whether the blast took me off my feet. I was just in shock at that point. Got up, turned around and just ran as fast as I could straight back to my car.
It's unbelievable.
And first-hand accounts from some of those right by the oil terminal when the main explosion happened. One man told the BBC how he was working with a colleague when the blast knocked him off his feet.
We had to break a window of a chair to get out because obviously we couldn't open any of the doors. They were all bent up. So we managed to stumble down the stairs, what was left of them, and get out to the front of the building. And then luckily there people were driving up and down in the cars. And two people stopped and took us to the hospital.
And more scenes taken and sent in by mobile phone, here showing the extent of some of the damage caused in the immediate vicinity of the depot. Viewers' own images capturing the drama of the day. Daniel.The, BBC News.
Well, some dramatic footage there. We are still inviting anyone who may have pictures to send them in to our Your Pics address, the email address there, showing you how to do that. If you have dramatic footage, then let us see it. There have been many people out and about today having a look at what's been going on. That in itself is quite telling of how strangely sort of precise the problem is here, in that look at where we are a mile away, and although this is a dramatic sight behind, here you can't even smell it. This is just the sun going down now, but a very pleasant afternoon. There's no smell, there's no acrid feel to it at all here, because of course you can see the wind is taking it off, and the wind's picked up somewhat now as well, taking it off in that very precise easterly direction. Now, some people got caught up very close to this indeed when it actually happened. It's in an industrial estate area and it was relatively quiet for very obvious reasons early on a Sunday morning. But I spoke a little bit earlier to one person, a security guard who worked just close by, a quarter of a mile to the actual explosion, who really did get the shock of his life. His name was Troy Woodland. I spoke to him just a short time ago.
We're all of a sudden a very, very bright orange light, then an extreme shock, and the whole ceiling fell in, and the doors had blown inwards and knocked me off my chair.
And what did you do then?
Well, when I got myself to my feet, I forced the doors open and went outside. I thought the actual building was actually collapsing. And then I walked out and recognised that there was a huge ball of flame right in front of me, that something quite serious had actually happened.
I have to say that, I mean, you know, I'm a mile away from it at the moment, 6-7 hours on, and it looks quite intimidating. That must have been extraordinary to have seen it at that stage so close.
It was extremely frightening, and to the point I still can't get my head around what actually happened, to be honest with you. It was a major shock.
And what did you do then? Run?
Well, no, as I went out, I took it quite personally, as if it was the actual company that was being attacked. It felt like the actual building had been pushed over. When I went outside, I realised that there was debris everywhere. The buildings aside were obliterated. The fronts of buildings were missing. And this huge ball of flame was again in front of me.
You had no trouble getting out of your building, because we've heard how some people were unable to open the doors because they'd buckled in the blast.
Well, luckily I was the only person on site, and I was near the doors going outward. Although I had to force the doors backwards to get out, I managed to get out.
Was it immediately obvious to you what had happened?
It's difficult to explain, to be honest with you. I recognise the fact that it was a major incident, but I couldn't put any sense to it. Everything, all of a sudden, what was generally normal, all of a sudden turned into something which was totally abnormal, and I couldn't put any sense to anything whatsoever at that point.
Yeah, and we've heard how people heard this thing from even as far away as Holland. I mean, I don't mean this to sound like a silly question, but how did it sound like when you were so close to it?
The actual explosion itself was deafening. It put me into a point of shock. As I say, I almost took it personally. It was almost like somebody had driven into the front of the building. As I say, it made no sense whatsoever until I went outside and then realised that all the buildings beside of me were semi-destroyed.
Speaking to Chris a short while ago, just to remind you that these explosions happened about 3 minutes past 6 this morning. Police say that half the site is now really on fire. The other half is still being contained and protected by firefighters who are hosing down a lot of the surrounding tanks. Just going back though to this huge explosion this morning and the noise that it made, this is how some residents awoke to that.
Just after 6 this morning, there's a massive bang. The curtains blew up into the air, a massive light. Didn't quite know what had happened. Thought that potentially a car could have gone on fire or something outside the house. Put the lights on, saw the amount of glass just shattered all over the room. Came downstairs, tried to open the door. It was slightly jammed, so we had to try and get that open. And then as we came outside, everyone was outside trying to see what damage had been done to the houses. And then in the distance over there, all you could see was just a massive, like a fireball in the air.
When it happened, I thought like an aeroplane was coming through the house or something, or one of the trees fell down. So yeah, it's very scary.
And you've got quite a bit of damage, haven't you?
Yeah, the windows are blown through and the shed windows blown through as well. So there's cracks down the walls and that.
Worried about staying here now after this?
Well, yeah, the smoke's a bit worrying. I mean, the fire, I don't know if they're going to get it under control and how long it's going to take. It's obviously it's oil and that, so it's not something they can just put out straight away.
Quite close to where those explosions happened. Some of the injured were taken to Hemel Hempstead General Hospital. Around 30 have been treated and discharged now, just with cuts and bruises. One patient with breathing difficulties was transferred to Watford General, but the hospital remains on high alert amid fears that there may be more explosions.
Well, we remain on a standby footing. We are aware that there may be further explosions, and so from that point of view it's a possibility that there may be further injuries. We can't tell at this stage. We would hope not. But if that were the case, we would anticipate that those might be related to blast injury from further explosions, and so we are making sure that we've got sufficient respiratory support, intensive care unit support should patients arrive who've been affected by blast injury from explosions.
Jones from Hemel Hempstead General Hospital there. Let's just take you back now to our helicopter, which I think has refueled and is now back close to the site of these explosions. You can see that the flames are still shooting up 100, 200 feet into the air, fireballs continuing to roll up. There doesn't seem to be any end to that fire at the moment. Police are saying that half the site, Buncefield fuel depot, is now really on fire. The other half is not, and fire officers are hosing down the surrounding tanks there. Extremely difficult conditions for the rescue services there. It's expected that this fire really burn itself out, and police and rescue services are suggesting that it may continue to burn for at least another day, if not two. The latest casualty figures, remarkably, are this: 39 people taken to hospital for minor injuries. 2 people are said to have been seriously injured, but amazingly, miraculously, no fatalities have been reported in this series of explosions. These, the live pictures from the site, Buncefield fuel depot near Hemel Hempstead. But that cloud is now spreading right across the area and moving over London. We've seen pictures of that thick smoke spreading over Canary Wharf and heading over to Europe. Let's go back to near the scene now, speak to my colleague, Chris Eakin.
Yes, hello, I'm Chris Eakin near Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire, where 8 hours on there is still a huge plume of smoke from an oil depot where there was a series of explosions. 3 explosions starting at 6 o'clock this morning, and they were heard as far away as Holland. 36 people were taken to hospital. 2 of them only are still there. It's one of the remarkable aspects of this explosion that nobody has been killed, because from the air we can see the extent to which this smoke is contaminating the region. The major aspect of this afternoon is that there is a public health warning. For anybody in the path of this smoke, which is towards the east, the word is to stay indoors and close windows. The authorities have said that they don't believe the smoke is toxic, but nevertheless you should keep away from it. The picture is very dramatic at the time of this explosion in Hemel Hempstead. Much more, of course, throughout the afternoon on News 24. Well, back to viewers on BBC News 24, and that's the scene now, this afternoon. Still 8 hours on from when this happened, and still the smoke lifting up and moving off to the right as we look at towards the east, towards the M1, and with people in its path being told to be careful because of the extent to which this smoke is dominating the area. Now, I'm about a mile or so away from where this has happened. My colleague John Brain is now a little bit closer to the actual oil depot. John.
Hello, Chris. Yes, we're about half a mile from the depot itself and about 60 feet above ground level at the moment, looking down on the scene. And as you can see from here, it's still burning fiercely. And it may not look like it, but the fire service do tell us that that is a situation under control. They say there isn't any danger of it spreading. The problem is it's virtually impossible to put out at the moment. That is burning fiercely, and it's going to take several days before it comes out. Now look, we'll try and show you where we are in relation to the depot. We can move the camera round to the right here and see some of the houses. We're just on the edge of a housing estate, and the houses, you perhaps hopefully coming into shot now, many of those had doors and garage doors simply blown off their hinges when the blast, I'm told, the moment, but a number of houses here had their doors and garage doors blown off and their windows blown out as the blast, the first and the biggest of the blast, happened just after 6 o'clock this morning. That was followed by 2 smaller blasts, and the police have warned that there will be subsequent blasts throughout the day. In fact, we did see one small one around lunchtime huge ball of orange flames thrown up into the sky. And as you can see from here, that plume of smoke still spreading its way eastward, away from Hemel Hempstead itself and towards London. But this a rude awakening for everyone in this area. People have talked of being thrown out of their beds by the blast, windows blown in, and a real shock. And as Chris was saying, it's even been heard as far away as Holland.
John, if you're able still to hear me there, John, I mean, what is the tactic then, as far as you're aware? Fuel to burn out?
That's part of the strategy, but they're also talking about a coordinated onslaught, which involves masses of foam being poured onto the areas. But the problem is, how close can they get to it? It's also not suitable just using regular fire tenders, I'm told. They have to have special, more heat-resistant tenders because of the ferocity of the heat that emanates from a fire of this sort. So they've had to go to other fire services around the country to get suitable equipment. But they are tackling it or preparing to tackle it, but they say they won't actually be able to put it out. That all they'll be able to do is contain it, which is what they believe they are successfully doing at the moment, but they will have to allow this to burn itself out, and that will take several days. Then, of course, the investigation can properly get underway into what caused this. Now, we are told that at this stage at least, it does appear to be nothing more than an accident. But of course, until the flames are out, until the smoke has dispersed, the investigation to determine the exact cause can't even begin.
John, it's very noticeable where, in my position, which is about a mile away from the explosion, that people are almost sort of enjoying is the wrong word, but they're all out to have a look at it. It's a curiosity, because there's no threat to them at all. Where we are, you can't even smell it, indeed, from here. And I just wonder if that is different where you are.
No, it's exactly the same, actually, Chris. This smoke, we're told, is not toxic, though the health authorities have warned people to stay inside, because they say, obviously, thick smoke such as this is an irritant if you actually get any closer to it. But likewise, people here are out, they're taking photos, they're on their mobiles, taking pictures and calling friends and family, telling them what they're seeing. A large number of people out and about across this whole area, just looking at from the vantage point, we can see various spots where people have come out. It is a bit of entertainment for them. They're coming out, they're looking at the flames and the smoke, not necessarily heeding those warnings to stay indoors. Having said that, the smoke is going away eastwardly away from us, and as you say, we can't really smell anything untoward.
Right, John, well, thank you very much indeed for that. John Brain, closer than we are from this position. Now, it's off to the east, it's off towards the M1 that this smoke is travelling, and that, of course, has had a huge effect on travel. Well, let's get the latest on that situation now with Jules Wilson. Jules.
Thank you very much. Well, the explosion itself at the Buncefield oil depot, that's actually on the A414 Breakspear Way, which is just off the M1. Now, the M1 is closed northbound. You can just see the closure at the bottom. Under the M25 at junction 6 for Bricket Wood, up to 9 for the A5. Southbound closures also in at 10 to 6. That's Luton, again, down to Bricket Wood. But we've got problems with the entry slips being closed at 11 and 12. That's Dunstable and Flitwick. So if you're not already on the motorway at Milton Keynes, effectively the closure in place from junction 12 at the northern perimeter in Luton. More closures for the M10, that's 7 for the M1 to junction 1 for St Albans. Lots of queues there on the approach. That's southbound at Hemel Hempstead itself. Police are advising your diversion routes for the A1 through Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire, M40 through Buckinghamshire. At the moment, though, with a couple of fairly serious accidents on the diversion routes. And in Hemel Hempstead itself, obviously the A414 Breakspear Way has been closed off too between junction 8 of the M1 and Leverstock Green. Now, lots of the road surfaces have melted. plenty of road closures in Hemel Hempstead itself, particularly on the eastern side of town. We've also got all routes through the industrial estates at the moment to the east of Mayfield Avenue closed off as well, and then roads through Leverstock Green to the south of Breakspear Way affected. Now, surprisingly enough, public transport at the moment, Silverlink County and Thameslink say their services are unaffected. Luton Airport as well, unaffected at the moment, but because of the closures in the area, there's no access to the airport from the M1, and Heathrow are keeping an eye at the moment on the visibility, so they'll keep us updated on the situation there. Also, lots of smoke drifting across London at the moment. Visibility has been pretty severely reduced in places, particularly for the M25, M1 obviously as well, and more problems for the A1, that's the Barnet bypass, the Blackwall Tunnel and the Leytonstone areas have been affected as well. We have been told lots of those closures probably staying in place until at least tomorrow evening. That's it from me.
Right, Jules, thank you very much indeed. The M1 being off to the east there, as are indeed, well, you can see the houses just near me. However, those houses have been enjoying the sunshine most of the days, strangely, with the oil and the smoke well up there in the sky, but it is drifting over a large area, and the official advice is to stay in and keep windows closed. And there is some concern, of course, from local residents. Well, the local MP, the MP for Hemel Hempstead, Conservative MP, is Mike Penning, and joins us now right here. Indeed, you're an ex-firefighter, as it happens.
Very much so. I was trained as a fireman in Essex. I served for nearly 10 years as a fireman, and I was trained to fight this sort of incident just like our excellent crews here have been, and they've done a fantastic job this morning.
I mean, we can see over your shoulder the extent to which this smoke is still pouring out as if the fire has only just happened. What is the level of concern among local residents as to what they could be breathing in?
Well, the local residents are concerned. We mustn't be about the bush. This is a major incident. The toxins are going mostly up. There were no chemical facilities there. This is straight heavy oil that's burning at the moment. Most of the petrol, I understand, is already burnt off. The problem is that this is a huge, huge fire. You could probably fit 4 football pitches in the middle of this fire and still have space. So the fire brigade can't just put it out. It's going to have to be suffocated from fuel. They've cut off the tanks that there was pipes supplying this fire. They've been cut off, but there are still tanks in there which are holding fuel. That's the big job at the moment, is to make sure that they don't explode or leak any more fuel. And then the specialist foam equipment is being brought in to actually put the fire out. But that's going to take many hours, if not days.
You've presumably been asking questions about the level of risk for people underneath this smoke. And I did say underneath because we can see from the smoke behind us how the thick smoke is higher, but then you get that sort of fog-like effect beneath it. What answers are you getting to that?
Well, I've been as close as anybody can who's not actually fighting the fire. I've been up to the forward fire control area. I've been briefed by the senior fireman in charge and by the police. They do quite rightly say that you should stay indoors and keep your windows closed. However, most of this is going. A lot of the smoke that we can see over my shoulder probably now, a lot of it is actually steam as well as actually the dark smoke, which is the heavy oil burning off. But I'm afraid this happens when you have a major incident. But I understand there is no risk to my residents. If there was a risk, I would insist on an exclusion zone being put and people being evacuated. Some 2,000 people have already been evacuated, and I support that. And there are more that may need to be evacuated later. I've just come back from the hospital. All but one of the people injured this morning have been discharged. We still have one person with quite serious lung injuries. It's at the Watford Hospital being treated. Just proves that if you do plan successfully, things can be done properly.
Do you know how long people would remain evacuated from their homes for?
They'll be kept evacuated for the shortest possible time that safety means that they can. I think there may be more people that need to be